My name is Jamin Goecker. I'm a realtor in South Central Alaska, and my mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching you in real estate. And today, what I'm going to be doing is reacting to a pretty popular video that came out a little while ago talking about the 15 things that they don't tell you about moving to Alaska. And this is created by Ben and Rebecca over on Outliers Overland. So this is a great channel. They've got lots of great content on there. If you haven't seen it, definitely do go check it out. They're actually based in Seward, Alaska though, which you've certainly heard me talk about Seward on some other channels. So I'm looking forward to taking a look at this and seeing how many things we might agree or disagree on. They actually live here in Alaska, so they definitely got that going for them. Before we get started though, do make sure you give this video a like. And if you haven't done so already, do make sure you subscribe so you can receive more content like this in the future. Now, without further ado, let's go and jump into today's reaction video.
Number 1, Alaska is the largest state in the US of A.
Very true.
Why is this so important, you might ask? Well, because you need to comprehend exactly how big Alaska is and how long it takes to get to places. For example, if you are going to move to Fairbanks and have a cousin who lives in Homer, you're not going to be exactly neighbors.
I am so glad already that they said that, because there are a lot of people who think that Alaska is just another state in the lower 48, and they don't realize the size of it just because it's usually shrunk down to fit on a lot of maps. And also they don't realize how much of the state isn't really accessible by road. We do have a road system, but there's a lot of communities and parts of the state where you just can't get to it unless it's by plane or by boat.
In reality, you're
liking
looking
it
at
already.
about a 600-mile drive.
Yeah, if you laid Alaska over a map of the lower 48, it would stretch from North Dakota to Texas and California to Florida. And I'm sorry, Texas, Alaska is twice the size of your cute little state.
It's actually a really popular bumper sticker up here that just says we should cut Alaska in half and make Texas the third biggest state. So Texas bashing really is a good pastime up here.
Now moving on to number 3, another misconception: Alaska does not have any taxes.
Okay, now this one is both true and false. The true part is that there is no state income tax in Alaska and no state sales tax in Alaska.
The false part comes into play with sales taxes put into effect by boroughs and municipalities. Our hometown of Seward is a perfect example. We have a 7% sales tax. 3% goes to the Kenai Peninsula Borough, and 4% goes to the city of Seward. There's also an additional 4% bed tax for lodging businesses, so a lodging accommodation totals up to 11% sales tax.
Another good case would be the municipality of Anchorage. They do not have sales tax, which is very helpful when you make those supply runs to town, and you also never leave Anchorage without a full tank of fuel.
That brings
Yep, absolutely true. There really is no good way for the state to collect money, and that's why you see property taxes becoming so high in some places, just because there's really no other way to earn money. And that's another hot button political topic for those that are in the area. Where's the balance between making a good, fair tax system if the property owners are the ones accepting all the liability and the risk? How fair is it to expect them to also pay a disproportionate amount of the tax burden in the area also? So this is kind of an ongoing debate, so stay tuned.
Jobs will even offer relocation fees. The kicker is that you usually have to work in underserved areas, and a lot of times that involves helping the Alaska Native population. The most common jobs that qualify are in healthcare and teaching.
We actually did this when we moved to Alaska. I'm a PA by trade, had just finished graduate school, and carried a big honkin' chunk of school debt to go with it. So we moved to Alaska. You get either an IHS or a HRSA grant to pay off your school loans to your commitment to whichever organization you work with. and they do tax you on the money. So think about that when you look at dollar amounts. They're different with each organization.
But it has been an amazing experience for you.
Totally was a fantastic experience and led to all sorts of avenues opening up in my career, and also put us ahead financially because it paid off almost half of my school debt in those 2 years.
Now this segues in perfectly to number 5.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Really kind of depends on what industry you're going into. So she was a PA, that makes total sense. I also know teachers, that's something you can have taken care of as well. If you have a really in-demand specialty in more remote locations, that's going to be the kind of stuff that they're looking at. So great, absolutely.
This segues in perfectly to number 5, that there are amazing job experiences in Alaska, and it's also an excellent time to share a little bit more of our story.
Yes, we had a dream, and this was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It took time to prepare. I, as I mentioned earlier, am a physician assistant. Right out of grad school, got a job up here with the Native Corporation, practicing medicine here in Seward. That also included flying out to remote villages. Ben had spent 10 years working for Ford dealerships, but had always wanted to be a professional fisherman. So he became a U.S. Coast Guard merchant marine boat captain and fishing guide.
We also have friends in Alaska who are expedition leaders for wilderness lodges. Some work with the animals at the Alaska Sea Life Center. Others work for the oil industry up on the North Slope. Then we have neighbors that have commercial fishing boats. They'll work for the utility companies, and a handful of them are also in healthcare like Rebecca was.
Bottom line, if you're looking to do something out of the ordinary or really make a difference, this might be the right place for you to be.
And number 6, you may not be making a difference, but there's the myth that you can make a fortune working for the oil companies. Now, maybe in the 70s or 80s, the word fortune might have been accurate, but in present day, I would call it true because you can earn a good living working for the oil companies.
Since the discovery of the Prudhoe Bay oil patch, it's been big business here in Alaska. The Alaska Pipeline runs about 900 miles from Dead Horse, Alaska to Valdez.
And it's not just Alaskans that work for the oil companies. People come from all across the country to work variations of a 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off rotating schedule.
Yep.
This issue tends to be a bit of a double-edged sword because, let's be honest, the oil companies don't always have Alaska's best interest at heart. They tend to care the most about their bottom line, hold loyalty to their shareholders, and unfortunately, they're pretty embedded in our government and political system here.
So let's jump into number.
So quick comment about that. Yeah, totally true. Oil is definitely a big part of the state's outlook in this area, and that not just in this area, but really for the entire state. So that is very true. If you're looking at jumping into the oil field up here, it can be a little challenging to get into it, especially in times like this where the atmosphere isn't as friendly towards developing oil as it was in the previous administration. So talk about like some downsizings, and that just kind of comes with the territory. It's not going to be as stable, kind of depending on what job you have on the oil field, as you would have if you were working something in, lack of a better word, the normal workforce. But still a great opportunity if that's kind of your skill set and what you want to go do.
Number 7, and talk a little bit more about lifestyle instead of jobs. But Alaska is a great place to live in a cabin.
It is pretty easy and relatively affordable to buy or rent a cabin in Alaska. But despite what reality TV shows share, not everyone lives this way.
Thank you. Man, I'm glad I'm not the only one saying that. This is honestly a big pet peeve of mine, where people go on YouTube or reality TV, a bunch of other places, and try to present Alaska as though that's the norm. And it's different if it's, hey, this is us, and this is just our lifestyle that happens to be in Alaska, and that's perfectly fine. We make a big shift though when some people go over and say, well, this is just normal in Alaska, and I don't like it. I mean, yeah, it's clickbait, really, in my opinion, but let's keep going.
Yeah, cabins come in a wide variety of styles and modern options. You can have a cistern for capturing rainwater or drill a well. If you're near the power grid, you can run electricity, but solar, wind, and generators may also be used. Composting toilets offer a sustainable and warmer alternative to the long draw.
So if you're not too worried about having cell phone service or electricity, and you like the idea of hauling your own wood and water, pooping in an outhouse, and living off the land, you probably found the right place.
And that segues nicely into number 8, because it is realistic to live off of the land in Alaska. Some things like produce in the middle of winter may be problematic, but other than that, it's very manageable.
In a way, Alaska is a homesteader's paradise. You've got hunting for big game to provide red meat, spruce grouse and ducks cover poultry, the ocean almost always has fish to be caught, and when the salmon are in the rivers, it's game on.
You can also grow an amazing garden in the summer months. What you can grow is actually highly dependent.
So most Alaskans are going to spend a significant amount of time during the summertime really taking advantage of the abundance of the resources up here in Alaska, whether it be fishing, hunting, gardening, berry picking. There's just all sorts of things you can do up here to really supplement what it is that you're eating up here and all that. So that's great. I'm gonna say not a whole lot of people like 100% live off grid and live off of the land. It's something I guess you could technically do, but it's a very strong commitment to that lifestyle. So I've made videos about that before, talking about if you should be considering doing that. And I've interviewed people who have done it. So it's not an easy thing to do. So if that's something you're considering doing, I'd say the first thing is just don't over romanticize it and sit down in brass tacks and think about, are you gonna be able to handle it when it's 2 days in and you haven't heard anyone else except you or a couple other people and no cell phone reception or anything. That's great for some people. Other people, it's not so good, and it's better just to have a little vacation dry cabin somewhere that you can go to and unplug for a little bit. But yeah, definitely you can live off grid and live off the land here for sure.
And when the salmon are in the rivers, it's game on.
You can also grow an amazing garden in the summer months. What you can grow is actually highly dependent on your location, but if you learn the craft of preserving, you can make that harvest last all winter.
The forest is also a very bountiful place. You've got foraging for mushrooms, berry picking satisfies the sweet tooth, we have spruce tips with enough vitamin C to prevent scurvy, and things like chaga and devil's club treat a wide range of ailments.
And the list goes on, so I think you get the point. But if all else fails, you can rely on the Alaskan staple called pilot bread.
And that carries us into number 9. Everybody in Alaska is packing heat. Per capita basis, this is definitely true. Alaskans own more guns than people in the lower 48.
Now, I wouldn't necessarily say that everyone is armed, especially when it comes to the highly populated urban areas of Alaska, such as Anchorage. But overall, a shockingly high number of people possess firearms.
Most ownership roots to the living off of the land mindset, and you have to assume that everyone here is armed because a permit is not necessary to carry a concealed weapon. And this may be an extreme example, but in Alaska, you could be pulled over for speeding, have a loaded pistol and a bag of weed on the dash, and only get a speeding ticket.
Yep, I would say that's very true. Yeah, very, very true. There's definitely a very big hunting community here, and not only that, but there's going to be a very strong community around gun rights up here also. So yeah, they did a pretty good job in stating that. I would only add that if you're looking to jump out and scare somebody on a trail, I would not pick the Alaskan because most are going to be packing, even on just hiking on trails around here. So, all right, well, let's keep going.
Essentially, what you need to realize is that Alaskans highly value their civil liberties and freedoms.
So this takes us into number 10, which I hinted at just a moment ago. Weed is legal in Alaska.
Now, for decades, at some level, it has been legal and loosely tolerated by law enforcement. But times they are a-changing, and like all of the western states and Canadian provinces, it is now considered recreational. Just do not go crossing international borders, because things are different on a federal level, and everyone wants their share of the tax revenue.
So on the topic of cannabis, the one thing I would add to that is that it's actually up to the communities to decide if they're going to allow weed shops and all this other stuff into the area that town is in. For example, the towns over in Wasilla, Palmer, and Matsu Valley, allow quite a few pot shops, and they're popping up all over the place. Meanwhile, in Eagle River, the way that our rules are set up, it makes it pretty much impossible to open up any pot shops. And then we've had, I'm on the community council here, so we've had a lot of requests for getting variances on those requests, or on the rules from pot shops who are trying to open up shop here. So yeah, it definitely is legal across the state, but the individual towns get to decide how it's implemented, or if it's done at all, really, just based on the way that they go about enforcing rules and creating them. So yes, definitely so. If you are a federal employee, which means if you are in the military at all, weed is still going to be illegal for you, because nationally, still illegal. In the state, it can be fine, but at the federal level, no. And if you're a federal employee, it's still off limits for you. So if you're in the military, you're going to hear that a million times, but you heard it here first.
Number 11 is a little nugget of truth. You are not guaranteed to see the aurora appear. And having said that, there's a few things to understand about the Aurora Borealis.
Yeah. Firstly, it is present year-round. There's just so much sunlight in the summer months that you cannot see it. And then in the winter months, if you're in the urban areas, there's light pollution. So keep that in mind if you're going on an aurora hunt.
The aurora is caused by solar flares. And those solar flares actually happen in a 5-year high to low cycle. Because of this, auroras can actually be predicted a few days in advance, because it takes those solar flares that long to reach our atmosphere. If you're interested in this, just Google it. It's a pretty cool topic to read about.
And lastly, the aurora will never look as good to your naked eye as it does when you're looking at somebody's photograph. That's because of exposure times. They just make the colors pop.
Absolutely true. So another thing I would add on this, if you're really trying to get out there and look at the aurora, you want to get as far away from the city as you can. A lot of people are going to live in South Central Alaska, but there's a lot of light pollution out here as far as city lights go, in Alaska anyway. So you can certainly see it from inside the city, but if you really want a good view, you got to go outside. So my go-to is usually like the Matsu Valley, somewhere on the Matanuska River or the Kinnick River. It's going to be a pretty good place to see the lights.
Next up, number 12. It's light all summer and dark all winter, which is kind of true, but kind of not true. And most of it depends on where you're located in the state.
Now, to thoroughly comprehend this, you need to know that summer solstice, the longest day of the year, is on June 21st, and winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, is on December 21st.
Being at such high latitudes like Alaska is, you're always going to have a high rate of change. The days are noticeably getting longer or shorter, sometimes by as much as 7 minutes per day. And a few examples to demonstrate this effect: if we look all the way up north at a town like Barrow, the sun doesn't set for an entire month during the summer. But if we head 1,000 miles south to our hometown of Seward at the same time, we experience darkness for a few hours between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m.
Those are a couple great examples of the summer, But when it comes to winter, it's pretty much the exact same thing except with darkness.
And that means we can move on.
I am so glad they brought this up, because this is another one of those clickbait things where people kind of look at the extreme parts of the state where it might have sunlight literally 24/7, like up in Barrow, like she was talking about, or it could be a little bit more moderate down in Seward. And then if you're going even further south, you go to southeast Alaska, it's going to more or less be more like it's going to be closer to like Seattle and their exposure to the sunlight in their patterns than it would be to south central Alaska or even further north. So yes, you do get those seasonal swings in there quite a bit, but it really depends where you are in the state. And I'm really glad they said that. You don't hear that a whole lot on a lot of these channels, because a lot of people try to make it sound like Fairbanks and further north is the norm, just for the sake of clickbait. So good on them. If you actually live up in Fairbanks, though, that's completely different, because that's your experience.
On to talking about number 13, where 70 degrees feels like 90 degrees. This interesting little bit of information, once again, has to do with Alaska's latitude and its position in relation to the sun.
Now, to help you comprehend this one, in the lower 48, during the peak hours of the day, the sun is very high in the sky, which means its rays and intensity is hitting you straight down, which is a smaller profile. But in Alaska, the sun is lower on the horizon for extended periods of the day, so it's hitting you broadside, and that literally makes 70 degrees feel like 90 degrees.
And we can move on to...
Don't know about that. I mean, it sounds right, but I mean, maybe it's just because I came from Texas beforehand, and yeah, I have a hard time with it feeling too hot. The one thing I would add, though, is that there is usually no AC in like 99.9% of homes up here in Alaska. So when it does start getting a little bit warmer, like up in the 80s, we'll get a couple of days each year where it get to about mid to high 80s, and that's going to feel pretty toasty just because you don't have AC inside the houses. So those days, either get outside, get comfortable on the lake, or go get some work done at your office space that has AC.
And we can move on to number 14. Things are always moving and a-shaking up here.
Alaska's Pacific coast sits on the famous Ring of Fire, which in turn creates a lot of seismic activity. And that essentially means we have numerous active volcanoes and over 1,000 earthquakes per month.
We routinely feel small shakers, but on a pretty regular basis, there are magnitude 6, 7, and even 8 quakes. Some of these quakes also trigger tsunami warnings or evacuations. Most are small and create hardly noticeable changes in sea level, but there's always the possibility of a serious event like 1960.
I'm really glad that they brought that up, and I'm sure it's something, if they live in Seward, that they're going to be very, very aware of. And that's because Seward as a town was actually completely wiped out after the '64 earthquake. So that went through, knocked out power for the entire state, really. There were entire communities they couldn't even contact for, I think it was about 2 or 3, 4 days, something like that, after the earthquake. They were finally able to contact all these smaller communities like Seward. And yeah, Seward just got flattened by the earthquake and the subsequent tsunami. That's really what caused all the destruction over there. And yeah, it's definitely just a fact of life up here that the ground's going to be moving and shaking from time to time, and you kind of just accept it. The buildings up here are luckily built in such a way so they kind of just go with the ground if things start moving, instead of being really rigid and being really brittle when it comes down to it. So, you know, I went through an earthquake myself, the one back in 2018, and I talked about that experience. See if I can just link it up above here so you can take a look at that. But yeah, earthquakes are part of the show up here, and you got to get used to it.
Last but not least, number 15, and it involves humans. We like labeling each other. Well, in Alaska, there are a couple unique labels, Sourdough and Cheechako. A Cheechako is somebody who has not experienced an Alaskan winter, and a Sourdough is a veteran Alaskan.
Pretty much this means you haven't earned your stripes until you have experienced the long winter. It's easy to see that glimmer in a Cheechako's eyes. They're so excited about winter and they have all these grand visions of all the things they want to do. On the flip side, you can see the hardened look in a Sourdough's eyes.
Now, in the modern world, survival may be a bit of an exaggeration, but there is no denying the winters are long, cold, and hard.
Absolutely. So that's all 100% accurate. If somebody calls you a sourdough up here, you instantly know what they're talking about, and that's definitely a term that's actually used. So that's just part of the Alaska lingo that gets used up here. But no, absolutely, I think this was a great video. They did a really fantastic job on really kind of peeling back the layers and kind of getting past some of the mystique of what it's like living up here in Alaska. So they did a great job with that. All in all, pretty impressed. And if you want to go check out their video, do make sure you go check that out over on their channel on Outliers Overland. So go check that out, and thanks for watching. Also, if you want to see more videos like this in the future, by all means, go ahead and drop a comment down below. I'd be very interested in doing more reaction videos going into the future here. Just got to know if it's something you folks are even interested in seeing. So thanks for watching. And if you do need to get in contact with me, just do so through my Facebook page. A link for that is going to be in the description section down below. You can also slide into my DMs on Instagram also. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.